In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to use the Divi Builder slider module, which can be used to add sliders to your page, either in normal columns, standard sections, or full width sections. And a slider is basically like a slideshow, so as you slide between each slide, the content of the slide, the image, and the background color, video, or image changes, and you can have as many slides as you want. And you typically see these at the top of home pages. For example, if you look at the home page of this demo, you'll see a nice slider at the top with the background video. And on the next slide, we have a background image and an image, and it's actually set to parallax mode, which is really cool. So the slider supports a parallax mode for background images. And so going back to our slider demo here, you can place them in any size column, or you can place them in full width sections as you see here. So here's an example of a full width slider, and here's some examples of normal sliders placed in 1/2 columns. And finally, here's another full width slider with a background video, which looks really cool. And like I said, you typically see these at the top of home pages. So I have like a nice home page I'm starting to build here, and I'd like to place a slider at the top above these 4 blurbs. So I'm going to edit the page, and to start out, we'll add a standard slider in a standard section. So I'm going to add a new standard section here, just a single column, and I'm going to move it up to the top of the page. And then I'm going to click the Insert Modules button and look for the slider module, which is towards the bottom. And once you click on the slider module, you'll be greeted with the slider module settings. And as with all Divi Builder modules, these settings are broken up into 3 tabs: General Settings, Advanced Design Settings, and Custom CSS. As a general rule of thumb, everything you need to build a really great page with the Divi Builder can be found inside the General Settings tab. But if you want even more control of your module, then you can venture into the Advanced Design Settings tab, which has a ton of different customization options and allows you to customize the appearance of every single element inside the module. You can change fonts, font sizes, colors, font weights, line height, letter spacing, margin, padding. There's really no limit to what you can do in the Advanced Design Settings tab. And if you happen to know CSS, you can also jump into the Custom CSS tab and apply your CSS rules directly to the module or elements inside of the module. And I have some really great tutorials that go over these 2 tabs, so be sure to check those out. But in this tutorial, I'm just going to focus on the general settings. So heading back to the General Settings tab, the first thing you're going to want to do in the slider module is add a new slide. So a slider needs to have at least 1 slide, typically more than 1 slide. And to add a new slide, you just click the Add New Slide button here, and then you're going to have a bunch of different settings for that particular slide. And there's a lot here to take in, so let's go over these one by one. First is the heading. This is the title of the slide. It appears in large text above the content text and the button. So I'm just going to call it slide number 1. And so yeah, slides also support buttons. If you don't put any button text or button URL here, then there just won't be a button in your slide, which is also fine. But if you'd like to use a button, you can input button text here. So I'll just say click here, and then you can also input a button URL. So for example, if your slide is kind of introducing your team, maybe you want to link it to your About Us page and have them learn more about your team. That would be one option. Or maybe you're asking them to sign up for your product or get a quote, anything like that. So you just want to customize that button text to be relevant, as with the URL as well. Now, each slide can have either a background image, a background color, or a background video. And so you can kind of choose what you want to do for your slide. And just to keep it simple for now, I'm just going to do a background color. So I'm going to skip the background image and go just to straight background color. And we'll just have a flat background color for this slide. And then I'll circle back and go over the background image settings. Now, sliders also support slide images, which will be placed to the left of the text. So you can optionally add an image to your slide, and I'll add one now. So I'm just going to pick a nice image to add here. Let's see. This looks good, so I'm just going to add this as my slide image. And like I said, this will appear to the left of the text inside the slide, not to be mistaken with the background image, which is used as the background for the entire slide. So you can choose the vertical alignment of the image. If you choose center, it'll be centered vertically, within the slider. If you choose bottom, then that image will be stuck to the bottom of the slide, and which is kind of like a nice effect if you're kind of trying to create the effect that the image is kind of behind the section below it. And a good example of that is, let's bounce back to this page, and as you can see here on this slide, here's an example of an image who's been aligned bottom. And so yeah, so it sticks to the bottom of the slide, and like I said, it kind of looks like this phone is actually behind the white space below here. And then another option would be to have the image in vertically centered here. As you can see, so there's space above and below the image. It's not stuck to the bottom like that iPhone I showed you a second ago. So you can choose centered or bottom for vertical alignment. Next up is slide video. If you'd like to use a video instead of an image, you can do that. I'll go over that later, but you can just input a URL to a video, like a YouTube video, and then that video will be displayed inside the slide to the left of the text. You can apply alt text to your image, which is, mainly for bots, so for Google or for screen readers and that kind of stuff, to know what the image is actually about. So if you have an image, like here's an image that has an S on it, I might want to say like S portfolio image or whatever you want to put there. So that's completely optional, but you can add alternative text to the image. Next is the text color. So since I'm using a dark background, this dark purple, I want to have light text. But if you're using a light background, you might want to switch to dark text to ensure that that text is readable. Next, we have background video. Like I said, each slide can have a background color, image, and video. In this case, I'm just using a flat color, so I'm not going to apply a background video. But when I make a new slide, I'll go over these in detail. So I'm going to skip over them for now and just go down to the content. The content is just kind of like the smaller size text that appears in a paragraph below the larger title text and above the button text. So you just want to, whatever information you want to put here, type that in, and like I said, it'll appear below the title in smaller text. You can also add an admin label so you can remember what this slide is about, but that's optional. And I'm going to save. And if at any time during the module editing process you want to get a glimpse of what you're working on, you can click the preview icon here, and then it'll show you the slide you've created. So here's my slide. It has a purple background. It has an image to the left here. It is centered vertically. And then I have my header text here, the main content, and my image. So it's looking good so far. So as you've seen so far, there are settings for the actual slides, but there's also general settings for the overall slider, which affects all slides. And so I'll go over those now. And so when you're in here in the main settings, you'll see these. And you can choose to have arrows or not. And this will remove, so typically there's arrows that pop in on the slider and you can click them to slide from each slide, but you can also hide those if you like, and then you won't be able to manually switch between slides, but you can have automatic animation enabled. So if you want your slide just to kind of like automatically slide through and not have people click the arrows, that's an option. You can hide the arrows or show the arrows, it's up to you. You can also choose to hide or show the slider controls, which are the little dots that appear at the bottom of the slider, which allow you to see which slide in the series of slides that you're on. And I'll show you those in a second, but you can choose to hide or disable those. Show or hide those. Next up is automatic animation, which I mentioned. If this is enabled, then your slides are going to automatically slide from slide to slide without the user actually clicking the arrows. And if you do enable this, you can choose how long it takes for each slide to automatically slide in milliseconds. So if you want it to take 5 seconds or between each slide, or 3 seconds between each slide, you can type that in milliseconds. So 3,000 milliseconds would be 3 seconds. You can, if you have automatic slide enabled, you can also choose to disable the automatic slide when the mouse is hovering over the slider. So that typically means someone's focused on the content in that slide. Maybe they're reading it, and so if you do this, then while they're reading that text, it won't automatically slide. And as soon as they take their mouse off the slider, it'll start sliding again. Next up is the parallax effect, which applies to background images, which we're not using. But if you are using a background image, you can apply a parallax effect, which looks really cool. And in my next slide, I'll go over that. Next, we have the inner shadow option. Typically, all sliders have an inner shadow applied to them, which just kind of like separates the slider from the stuff around it and kind of gives some depth to it. But if you're going for more of a flatter look, you can disable that. So I'm going to remove the inner shadow. If you did apply a background image, you can choose the position of that image. So top left, top center, top right. You can choose from any number of different positions for that image. Since we're not using an image, it doesn't matter in this particular slider. But when I add a new slide, I'll come back and configure these and show you what they do. You can choose different background image sizes, so you can choose to make it automatically fit to the slider, in which case the Divi builder will automatically change the dimensions of the image to make sure it always fits and always fills up the entire slide. Or you can just choose to have an actual size. And if you do that, if you upload a small image and you have a big slider, then the image will not end up covering the entire slide, but that's up to you. And finally, we have our admin label, CSS ID, and CSS class, which we won't be using in this tutorial. So I've added one slide. I'm going to go ahead and save and just show you what it looks like on the front end. And then I'm going to go back and add some more slides, one with a background image and one with a background video, so I can show you how those options work. And the options that I skipped over that apply to that, I'll go back and cover those as well. So here we have our slider. It's just one slide right now, so I can't flip through anything. And yeah, there's no background image, no background video, just a flat color. We have our slide image on the left, and we've applied a slide title, content, and button. So let's go back and add a new slide. And to do that, you can head back to the slider settings and click the Add New Slide button down here. And so I'm just going to call this slide 2. Input some button text and URL. And this time I'm going to apply a background image. So I'm going to click the Upload Image. And you can choose from any image in your gallery or upload a new image if you like. So I'm just going to find a nice image that can be applied to this slide. This is looking good. Nice mountain scape. It'll also look nice because it's kind of dark, so my light text will appear nicely over it. And so now that I've applied a background image, I can go over some of these background image settings. So top center, so you can apply different positioning to the images. Typically, I just leave it at default, but if you want, for example, if you had an image and most of the focus was at the top of the image, you might want to have it align top center instead of center. So just taking a look at our image here. Most of the content is pretty focused in the center, so that's great. So just leaving it at default is fine. But for example, if I had a picture of a person and maybe their head, was up at the top right of the image, and I want to make sure that that is always displayed, well, then I probably wouldn't want to have it aligned bottom or center, or else that person's face is going to get cut off, at most screen resolutions. So just depending on where your image, where the main focus of the image is, you might want to play with this background positioning. And then the background image size, you can choose to have it fit, cover, or actual size. And those are just 3 different kind of CSS options. And if you, like I said, if you have it set to actual size, the Divi builder is not going to resize that at all. It's just going to have it size of the actual resolution of the image. So if you have a huge image, then you're only going to see a small part of the image, right? Because it could be so big it's going to overflow the actual size of the slider. And at the other end of the spectrum, if you're a really tiny image and you have it, let's say a line top right, you're just going to have this little teeny square in the top right of your slide, and it's not going to look so good. So typically you just want to use default, fit, or cover, but I'm just going to keep it at default. Next is the background color. So even though we have a background image applied, I still want to add a background color, and the reason is because if someone has a slow connection, it might take a little while for that background image to load in. And for example, if we're using a dark background color and then a dark background image and light text on top of that background image, and then we have the default white background color applied, well, when that slide first loads in and the background image hasn't loaded in yet, you're going to see white text on top of a white background color, which is completely unreadable. So it's not a very good experience. And also if you had some like crazy purple background and then, this dark gray image on top, and then you kind of see you see this flash of purple as the image loads in, that's not good either. So typically just kind of choose a neutral background color that kind of matches your image. And so I have a dark gray image, and I'm just going to choose a dark gray background color to go along with it. And we can apply our slide image if we want. I'm just going to use no slide image in this case for this slide. And apply some content. And save. And we can get a preview like I said before. So if we take a look at the slide we've built so far, you'll see the second slide has a background image and then no slide image to the left of it like we had in our first one, which means that the content's going to be centered instead. And you can see how the slides automatically slide, and that's because I have automatic slide enabled. And if I turn that off, it won't automatically slide anymore. Let me fix this spelling error. Okay, I'm going to save and exit, and we'll take a look at the slider we built so far. So here we have slide 1, which is a flat purple background color. Our slide image is added, which means the slide is kind of broken up into two pieces, text on the right, image on the left. If we go to the next slide, we have no slide image, so our text is centered and is allowed to expand the full width. It's not broken into two sections like the first slide. And we have a background image instead of a flat color. Okay, so let's go back and add a third slide, and this time I'm going to do a background video. So I'm just going to duplicate this slide. You can also duplicate slides, which can save you a little time. So I'm just going to duplicate slide 2, jump into the settings here, call it slide 3 instead, and I'm going to get rid of this image. So if you just delete the URL in the input field here, then the image will also be removed. And this time I'm going to use a background video. And so whenever you apply a background video to a slide, you need to have it in two formats, MP4 and WebM. You need to have both formats uploaded. And the reason is because different browsers support different video types. And so if you only upload one of these two versions, then on a lot of browsers, the video is just not going to play. So you need to have both. And so typically you can, there's a lot of programs out there that will convert a video to WebM from MP4. And so there's a lot of free ones too. So depending on if you're on Mac or Windows, just type in free WebM converter, and you can probably find something that'll work for you. So you can upload a video. I have a few here. So I have this homepage slider, MP4, and I also have this homepage slider, WebM. So I can, since I'm working with the MP4 input, I'm going to choose the MP4 version here and set as background video. And then I'm also going to apply the WebM version to the WebM field. So I have two videos here, same exact video, but one's in MP4 format and one's in WebM format. Now, one other thing you have to be aware of is the size of your video. So when you created the video, you probably created it at a specific resolution. It had a height and a width. And if you don't know what that is, you can open up the video and inspect it and figure that out. But we need to tell the Divi builder what that width and height is so that it can correctly size the video on different screens. And so this is very important. If you leave this blank or don't input the right size, then when you view your slider, you might see that on some resolutions and some screen sizes, the video isn't filling up the section correctly. And so we want to make sure that that's correct. And I happen to know that the size of my video is 1920 in width and 638 in height, and that's in pixels. So 1920px by 638px. That happens to be the height of my video, but it may differ depending on which video you're using. And so that's the basic overview of background videos. You need to have two formats, MP4 and a WebM. They're typically the same exact video, just converted in two different formats. And you need to have the background width and height, 1920 and 638. Now, one thing else I want to touch on before we move on is that background video in general, HTML5 video is kind of a new thing. So depending on the server you're using, your server setup might not support it. And so you need to make sure that it does support it by registering the correct what are called mime types for your server. And this can typically be done using the htaccess file. And so if you take a look at the written tutorial notes below this video, we have a lot of info about how to do that, how to make sure you have the correct mime types registered. But if you've gone through these steps, if you've applied to MP4 video and a WebM, and you've put in the height and width, and for still some reason that video is not appearing on your desktop computer, most likely you need to register those mime types correctly. So be sure to check out that tutorial text below and do that if you run into any trouble. Okay, so I've applied my video and I'm going to save it, and we can get a quick preview here. Slide 1, slide 2 with the background image, and slide 3 with the background video. So there it is. It's looking good. I'm going to save and exit. And one more time, I'm going to show you what this looks like on the front end. So we now have 3 slides. The first one has a slide image, a flat background color. Slide 2 has no slide image and a background image. And slide 3 has a background video. As you can see, the video is playing there. I'll just let it play really quick. There we go. It fills in. Looks pretty cool. Okay, so we've covered almost everything. There's one more thing I want to cover, which is parallax background images. So I'm going to head back to the slider. I'm going to apply a parallax effect to this slider. And the parallax mode controls are on the main slider settings. So they're not inside the slide settings. They're here in the main settings. And down here, I'm going to choose Use Parallax Effect. So there's 2 parallax modes, CSS and True Parallax. And they're a little different. So CSS is a bit more dramatic, and it's going to make it so that the image you're using is at a fixed position. As you scroll, the image is not going to move at all in the background, and all the stuff around it is going to move at normal speeds. So it's going to look like that image is kind of stuck in the background and not moving, which can look really cool. True Parallax, on the other hand, uses JavaScript to move that image at a slightly different speed than the rest of the content around it, which kind of creates this cool effect of depth. And so it's like you're pivoting around 2 different objects, right? And the object in front of you is moving slower relatively to the object below it, behind it. And so it kind of creates this parallax effect, a true parallax effect. And so you can choose between those 2 different modes. And I'll just start off with CSS to show you what that looks like. I'm going to save and exit with parallax enabled. And then we can view the page and show you that parallax effect. So it only applies to background images. So I'm going to go to slide 2. And as you see, as I scroll, that background image is stuck in its position and the text moves on top of it, which is pretty cool. But it is really dramatic because we're using the CSS mode, which just stops that image from moving entirely. It's just completely stuck. But if we were to change that to parallax mode, it's going to be a little bit more, true parallax mode. It's going to be a little bit more subtle, which I tend to like better, but it's all up to you. It's personal opinion. So I'm going to refresh this and we'll take a look at true parallax mode. As you can see here, the image isn't stuck completely, but it is moving a little bit slower than the stuff around it. And so that's what true parallax mode is. And you'll also notice that when using CSS parallax mode, depending on the resolution of your image, the way it works is that using CSS parallax mode, it stretches the image to the width of your browser. And so if you're using if your browser happens to be really tall, like on an iPhone or an iPad in portrait mode, then that background image in CSS parallax mode is going to be stretched to be really, really big because the height of the image has to be the height of the entire browser. So if you're playing with an image in CSS parallax mode, you notice, man, my image is getting stretched way too big. I don't really like how it looks. Try using true parallax instead, or disabling parallax entirely. So there's one more thing left I want to do, and that's show you how you can add a video here instead. So I'm going to add a YouTube video to the slide instead of an image, which is also an option. So let me find a great video to use here. Okay, I have a video. I'm going to edit this slide. And on our second slide, or our first slide, sorry, where we have an image, I'm going to take off this slide image, and instead I'm going to use a slide video. So I've just pasted in my YouTube URL. It supports YouTube. It also supports custom videos if you want to input a URL to your own video. Vimeo as well also works. Okay, so I'm going to save. And we can just get a quick preview of this. As you can see, my Divi video has been added in place of that image. So that's an option as well. You can do videos or images in your slide. Now that's a basic overview of all the slider module settings, but before I leave you, I want to just go over one more thing, which is a basic overview of the advanced design settings. And I'm not going to go over all these. I'm just going to show you that you really can customize just about everything. So for example, if I wanted to maybe change the title font, make it a little bit bigger in all caps, I could do that. I can choose a custom color as well. If I jump into the preview, I can see my modifications here. I just bumped up this header font size. I changed the font and also made it bold in all caps. So yeah, there's really no limit you can do here. You can customize absolutely everything, customize the button if you want. Maybe add a custom background color to the button. I can preview that. There you go, I added a green background color. So yep, these advanced design settings are a lot of fun, and it's really easy to customize stuff, and it's nice to kind of jump back and forth between the preview mode here as well. And that is a basic overview of the Divi Builder slider module.